high atop the pastoral center of the Diocese of Camden, you're listening to Talking Catholic.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talking Catholic. I'm Jen Morrow, and with me today is Mike Walsh. Was that uplifting enough?
It was. Well, I need you to be up today because I am exhausted. This is actually the third recording I'm doing today, and
my second.
You were on Joyful Disciples with Donna Ottaviano Britt for a video that's going to come out soon, and you're promoting the Catholic Communications Campaign, which will be the second collection on the weekend of May 20th, which supports the great work of people like us, the Catholic Star Herald and the Communications Department for the diocese. 50% of the collection stays within the diocese. The other 50% goes to the USCCB for their efforts. But we would encourage you to give so that you can support fine entities like us, so I can create even more podcasts and YouTube shows and TikTok accounts and all the other stuff.
So basically, if you want to hear and see more of Mike Walsh, donate in the second collection on May 20th and 21st.
Actually, I'm going to go a different route.
Okay.
If you people promise to donate, I will only ever do this podcast and nothing else, so you never have to listen to me or see me ever again. But if we don't get enough money, I'm going to start doing them all myself, and then you're going to have to see me everywhere. So that's more of a threat than anything else. But
and I think people, just to explain a little bit more, the money is from the Catholic Communications Campaign. Like Mike said, 50% goes to the USCCB for their evangelization efforts, and the other 50% stays in the Diocese of Camden, which helps us promote the gospel through all of the events at our parish levels and all of the good works being done by our many departments in the Diocese of Camden.
Yeah. And if you want to know more about that, watch the Joyful Disciples YouTube show with Donna Ottaviano Britt, which I believe will be coming out the third week of May, if I'm not mistaken, because I think Carrie's got a show next week, and then Donna's will be the week following. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Or maybe yours is going to be next week. I don't know. I can't keep the schedule straight.
It'll be a surprise.
Apparently, it's a surprise to me. But we actually have a lot of great things coming up in the diocese soon. But one of the things we just celebrated was I Race for Vocations, which the Star Herald did an outstanding job doing coverage of, considering for the second year in a row the fact that it had to be done during a monsoon.
I know. I was like, oh my goodness, because the whole month was so beautiful with the weather. But, we got the word out, early enough. I think everybody looked ahead to the weekend, so it might be a little bit of a rain issue. And so we got the word out that we were going to move things around a little bit. And the iRace, the actual race itself, the 5K, took place at noon at Cooper River Park, Jack Curtis Stadium. And then Mass, followed with Mass with Bishop Sullivan at the Cathedral of the Immaculate Conception, with a little luncheon and balloon animals afterward.
Yeah,
I have to mention the balloon animals because I was surprised for them. That's Carrie Janice's traveling balloon animals.
Carrie Janice, the hardest working Catholic woman that I've ever met in my entire life, in addition to her regular day job, also runs an entertainment company. And one of the things she does that she's particularly known for is that she does balloon animals, beautiful balloon animals. She's also a stilt walker.
Oh, yeah.
And she oftentimes does them simultaneously.
I know. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah,
I was supposed to get a cat animal balloon. She was making cat animal balloons, and I was supposed to go afterward and get one, and I ran out of time, so I was talking to other people. Carrie Janice, when you're listening to this, can I have a cat balloon animal, please? Thank you.
We can only hope that Carrie would listen to one of our episodes. Ironically, where we are today, which I don't think we've ever podcasted from before, Carrie happens to be here right now giving a presentation. We saw her car in the parking lot.
We did.
So iRace is a great event. In its heyday, we'd have almost 1,000 people there, and simply because of COVID and 2 rainouts, the numbers haven't quite been there, but not because people don't support vocations, but because a pandemic occurred and then a whole heck of a lot of rain. But our dedication to vocations has not wavered, and they're already trying to figure out what they're going to do for next year.
It was so great because I was at the field to watch the runners, and people were out, and there were people cheering others on, and Marianela Nunez, one of our podcast hosts, of course, co-hosts, and I were huddling under an umbrella as we watched it all go on. But the seminarians were there, family from the seminarians were there running, which was pretty exciting. And Mike Walsh showed up in theory. That's what we heard. I don't know if he actually did. We got a picture of a goose and some ducklings to prove that he had shown up somewhere at the park, and then that was it.
To be clear, those are two entirely different animals.
I know.
So.
I don't know what goose babies are called.
They're called goslings.
Oh, okay.
Goosing. Were they geese or
I guess
ducks?
I should go back to high school.
I actually can't remember what the video was, but yeah, it was this beautiful train of a goose with his little baby goslings coming in behind him. But next year we'll come back at it even bigger and better. So
it was, and the cathedral when at Mass it was full, and it was so great to see so many families at the cathedral for the iRace Mass.
Yeah. Yeah. So then, but speaking of vocations, we actually have a very joyous occasion coming up on May 20th. One of our lovely seminarians will be ordained a deacon.
Ricardo Lorenzo Cruz. As Mike said, his ordination to the transitional diaconate will be held at St. Augustine Church, St. Damien Parish, Ocean City.
On May 20th. We think at 10:30 in the morning, but it's definitely going to be in the morning. We will be live streaming it, but anybody is encouraged to attend. It's a beautiful church, and who doesn't want to spend a Saturday in May down in Ocean City? Go hang out with Ricardo, get his first blessing as a deacon. That's always a big deal, and then walk up to the boardwalk for a little mancos and mancos. Or some Curly's fries.
Your favorite.
Seriously. I volunteer for all of our Ocean City stuff just for the food. And the joy and spirituality.
Yes.
And things like that.
And that, of course.
But, Ricardo he's going to be a great priest someday, God willing. And he is perhaps one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my entire life. Just a sweetheart of a human. And I really hope that our fellow diocesan family can come to this event or at least watch the live stream, because I'm very proud of Ricardo, and when hopefully, God willing, he becomes a priest next year, he's going to be a great member of the presbyterate.
He really is.
So, yeah, he really is. I mean, he really is. Like, he remembers people's names that he's met once. Didn't you say he remembered your husband out of nowhere?
He did. We had attended the Good Friday service in Atlantic City, which is the first time my husband's met Ricardo, and it's probably only the second time I've actually had a long conversation with Ricardo because he's very busy. And when I saw him at iRace, he asked if me and my husband would be at his ordination, and he said both of our names, and I was like, holy moly. I was like, Ricardo has one heck of a memory, which just means he has one heck of a heart because he's listening. So that's pretty outstanding.
And he's present. That's another thing about him. He's a very present seminarian, so I think he's going to do a great job. Yep. But speaking of present, you and I are actually present at some place that I've only been to a handful of times in my entire life, but I very much enjoy coming here. And I'm very happy about it. We're here at Camden Catholic High School.
Camden Catholic High School.
Yes.
And I'm very excited because...
And you work in the original Camden Catholic High School.
That's right, I do.
Yeah, the Pastoral Center for the Diocese of Camden is the original Camden Catholic High School that we work in.
So it's all coming full circle.
It is.
So this is usually the part of the show where I introduce who is on the show. However, because we have a podcaster on the show, I think it would be great if she introduced herself and her fellow guests.
Oh, that is... Okay, for anybody who's listening right now, that is Jen doing an end run out of introducing someone who has a tricky last name. I just want to let everyone know that right now, because before the podcast, she didn't get it right once.
I got it right just maybe
I am
once.
going to do a proper introduction.
All right.
No, I am.
Go ahead, Mike. Why don't you do that?
Well, for anyone who listened to the podcast several weeks ago, they know that I hate promoting other podcasts on our podcast. We had the Father Mike Schmitz one.
That's true.
And I bristled at that.
Yeah.
When this one was brought to our attention, I said, yeah, bring it on.
Jumped at it.
I was so excited.
We both did.
Camden Catholic High School has a brand new podcast created by a junior at the high school, Trish Escarrilla. How you doing? Got close enough, right?
Wait,
it's better than hers.
Let me try.
Okay.
Trish Escarrilla.
It's closer.
Closer. Oh, I think I like that, Mr. Wall.
Hey, at least I attempted it without having someone else to do it first.
And we also have Mr. Jeff Bruckner with us. Hello.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Mike.
Mr.
How we
Bruckner.
jumped in there for the easy one.
Yeah, no, that was nice of you. So, we're having a little bit of jocularity here right now, but Trish, we love actually the fact that this is like maybe a month ago when your podcast first started. Yep. Somebody on the the Camden Catholic social media page reached out to Talking Catholic directly to promote the fact that you guys were going on, and like, when are we going to have you on our podcast? And I was like, as soon as possible.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us. This is great.
impressive.
Yeah, actually, my the same day on the ride home from the bus stop, my mom pulled out her phone and showed me that. So
That's awesome.
I saw the post, the tagging, the commenting, the everything. But thank you for having me on it.
No,
it's really cool.
This is great. You're our actually, come to think of it, I've had this podcast for 5 years, and I think you're there's one other podcast, Catholic podcast in South Jersey that I'm aware of, and I don't really like that one, but I've listened to yours several times now, and you have an excellent podcast. So
Thank you
good job.
so much.
There you go. So now, Mr. Bruckner, you've been Trish's teacher in this regard and helped to oversee the podcast?
Exactly.
Okay.
And how long have you been a teacher at Camden Catholic?
This is my 16th year teaching at Camden Catholic.
And what all do you teach? Or
So I teach a bunch of electives. So I teach a communications course, which is mostly for seniors. I teach a AP seminar course, which is one of our newest AP courses here at Camden Catholic. I also teach film production and film studies.
Okay, so you're really involved in the communications aspect of things.
Yeah, exactly. If I didn't have an AP seminar, I would just be the video guy. So that one elevates me a little bit.
It's a good title.
Yeah.
He's one of our people.
Oh, and of course, as Trish is reminding me, this is actually how we probably came to know each other, because I've never taught you in class.
Never had you teach
but
in class.
I also run our TV studio.
And I've seen that TV studio. It is impressive.
Yeah, and Trish has been a member of our studio since
freshman year.
Since freshman year, yeah.
Wow, very nice.
All 4 years. Oh, well, not fourth yet.
Right,
All 3 years so far, but I am going for the fourth next year.
Way to look ahead, Trish. We like that. So tell us about the podcast. Whose idea was it?
And what's the name of it?
Yeah.
So the podcast is we have a thing called Inspire internships here. I went under Mr. Bruckner's media production one. So what happened is that you had to get interviewed to see if you're eligible to have the internship. So when I went in, we talked about it, and he said that he already had a vision for me if I were to be an intern. And so he pulled up the idea to me actually about starting a podcast, because you saw it at another school, and then he said that he thought I'd be a good host, and that was so flattering. And then I was like, I'm not sure though, because that's like a whole, like I work at I say work, it feels like work. I call Mr. Bruckner my boss, but I've been at CCTV. I do a lot of different video stuff. I help tech direct now, so I've been around technology and stuff, but I've never really touched audio, so I was like kind of scared, kind of nervous to do it. But when we talked about it more and started thinking about ideas, that's when I came in. The idea was pretty much mine. Basically on the podcast, I bring faculty and staff on, and I just talk to them, because especially my freshman year, it was still pretty peak COVID, and so actually I didn't spend about the first half of freshman year in school. I was virtual learning, so I came in halfway through the year, and it was kind of hard to make friends because I feel like I was behind and everything, and so I ended up talking to a lot of teachers more than like my classmates. Now it's about even half and half, which is good, but I really wanted to focus on the faculty because they were like my first friends I had here, and they're all really nice. And because of that, I just realized, they may be teachers in the classroom, but they're people, and they're fun people to talk to. So that's why I decided to interview faculty and staff on my show. And then the rest was up to Mr. Bruckner. You found the equipment and everything, kept me updated, and then it was probably just 1 or 2 months ago when it really went into motion, and it's I got the equipment, and from that point on, I started scripting things. I started reaching out to teachers, and I recorded my pilot episode, and it's been kind of fast, but it's really cool. But that's what it's about.
That's what you got to do. You just sort of throw yourself into it. That's how this podcast started. We just sort of decided one day that let's wing it and see what happens. There's a whole bunch of people out there that have podcasts. Why can't it be us? So sure, why not? Let's make it happen. And just Jen mentioned this earlier. The name of the podcast is
Between Bells.
Between Bells. And where can it be found?
It can be found on Spotify. We have a QR code we throw up every morning, but you can also search up Between Bells CCHS. You have to add the CCHS on there, because unfortunately there's another podcast with the
Between
name,
Bells.
But this is ours, so we have our little CCHS there for it.
Very nice.
Now, how did you come up with the name? Because for people who haven't listened yet, you're talking about things with teachers and faculty that is not necessarily about school, right?
Yeah. So originally, again, the point was to really showcase faculty and staff as people and not so much themselves as teachers. So I call it Between Bells because it's when you're trying to figure out what they're like between the dismissal bell one day and then the homeroom bell the next day, which is not school.
Yeah.
So, but interestingly enough, in the episodes I've done so far, it's kind of hard to like detach a teacher from what they teach. Not because that's all they are. Definitely not. That's not what I believe. That's why I started the podcast. But I've learned that people go into teaching because they genuinely love this subject. But in addition to that, I also talk about other things. And usually the topics I bring up with teachers are just things I already know about them from talking to them. A lot of the teachers I bring on are teachers I talk to. So
Very nice.
Now, Mr. Bruckner, have you been on the podcast?
So not yet, but I believe we are producing our episode on Friday, right?
Yes.
Or recording our episode on Friday.
Soon, very soon.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I knew I didn't want to be one of the first guests. I wanted to make sure that Trish could, work out any, I was waiting. I was like, oh, okay. I think Trish has found her stride now. she's kind of like perfected the art. I joke about that, but because when you listen back to, like even episode 1, Trish approaches everything, including this podcast, in a very like professional way. So when she said like how we kind of like, she just like jumped into it once she got the gear, it wasn't like haphazard in jumping into it. She was working on pre-production for months and sending me outlines for shows and putting together her own graphics, like creating her own design. And so like there was a lot of behind the scenes for months of her kind of like letting this stew so that once she did have the opportunity with the equipment, that she could just hit the ground running.
Yeah. Well, as Jen and I were remarking on the way here, you already have better production values than our podcast does. Oh no, it does. You edit. You have sound that goes into it. You script your opening. You are doing a lot of very technical elements to the podcast that I have eschewed on this podcast because I have a different perspective on it. So I'm curious, as you were developing this, were there other podcasts that sort of you were taking ideas from, or other radio shows that maybe you brought this from? Like what helped you actually plan what the production of the podcast would be like?
Yeah, I guess I'm honestly like, I would say even now, which is ironic because I run a podcast, I'm not a big podcast person, but I'm a big like video essay person. Like I go on YouTube, I love learning about things. But I'm one of those people that put on a video in the background. So I guess that's kind of like listening to a podcast. Yeah. So I listen to a lot of YouTubers and just, I guess it's just used to having to listen to someone talk about something organized and intros, outros, things like that. There's some podcasts I've listened to. There's this one podcast called the Sad Boys Podcast on YouTube that I listen to. It's like these two guys, and they're just talking about life. So that's just a calming little thing that I listen to. But yeah, I think when it came to making my podcast, I just knew that I wanted to, of course I have to reflect the school very well, but I also wanted to be something that I would listen to. So I mean, if you listen to the podcast, you'll like hear some, I specifically tried looking for arcade sounding music because I like video games. So I have like little fun bits in there. I have my in between bells breaks because sometimes I'll be listening to something and I might like space out. So I think having a break would be nice. A lot of the things that went into my podcast were mostly just off of a reflection of what I would want as a listener. But it's great now that it's out because now I get feedback from people. It's largely like positive, but like there's some criticisms here and there, but I take those to heart and I am working on like incorporating it and stuff.
No, you should always listen to the criticisms. I've gotten my share of criticisms with all the stuff that we produce. I think this is our 335th podcast, I think, right now, and it is completely different than when it first started. It used to be, it bears almost no resemblance to the original, and I think that's one of the things that tends to grow. You get a feel for what you're going to do, and then you kind of tailor it for what you're into down the road, and you move things. Is this something that you're going to continue on next year when you're a senior? Yeah,
actually, like, what was it, like yesterday or like the other day, I came up to Mr. Bruckner because I was kind of worried because the Inspire internship, usually the description of it is you do it for a year, you have to do at least 50 hours, and you get 5 college credits from it. So I was like, what's going to happen after this year when I'm not in it anymore? Do I still get to do it? And then, yeah, if I want to, I can come back and do it next year. I can even try mentoring someone to do it after I graduate, of course. Cool. But I'm definitely looking forward for more episodes next year. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great.
I can't wait. Now, I did, hold on, I got to say, because I pointed at Mike, like, I told you so, and when we were on the way here, because I listened before too, but your video game sounds, because what you just talked about, we were in the car, I'm like, and listen to that. It's like something from Atari or Nintendo. I love it. I feel like I'm at the arcade.
I love those things, yeah.
I loved it.
That's what I'm saying. The projection value is so much higher. It's genuinely good. It's also, about 30 minutes? Just under 30 minutes?
Yeah, I try to keep it to like 20, 25 minutes. But of course, if I'm talking to teachers, I usually talk to, like my one episode with Dr. Nguyen, I think it's episode 3. I had to cut down on like an hour's conversation. I try my best, but it's around like 20, 25 minutes.
See, I like that you do that. And I like that you're in the habit of doing it now. So when we started this, our podcasts were an hour and a half. I think our longest podcast was 2.5 hours.
Whoa.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, I think you know me well enough to know I can fill 2.5 hours.
Sure.
But we ended up getting a deal with our good friends over at Domestic Church Media, and they came to us and said, "Hey, we'd love to simulcast your podcast, but we do 54.5 minutes. Can you cut down to 54.5 minutes?" To which I said, "How about I just do a 54.5 minute one, because I don't feel like editing." And I've never changed my mind on that. But the fact that you're starting now with all those bells and whistles, I really think that's truly commendable that you're doing that.
You.
So you mentioned that you got gear. Where did you, what kind of gear do you have for your podcast?
You should ask Mr. Bruckner that. He knows more about that than me.
So our principal, Heather Creasy, was really great in finding, I think it was a grant to pay for our gear. So not to brag or name drop other podcasts, but my wife and I have a podcast.
Nice.
And so we started it over a year ago. And so I'd already done the research on gear. We have a little studio in our home office. And so I essentially just got Trish everything that I have, because that's my setup at home, and I'd be able to teach it to her. I was like, this is how I do it. Anyone can do it any way they want, but this is how we do it. And so it was as easy as that.
Yeah.
Okay, now I'm curious, what is your podcast about?
Yeah, so our podcast, so my last name is Bruckner. Our podcast is called Baja Brucks, and it's just about hanging with me and my wife in our backyard. Nice. Baja Brucks, that's what we call our backyard. We're the entertainers in our friend circle. Yeah. And so we loop it into a marriage podcast, but it's really just kind of talking about our experiences, some pop culture every once in a while. But I always try to circle it back into, how we're individually just growing in our marriage. We've been married this summer now 5 years, so of course we're experts. But it's real time, real time kind of figuring stuff out. And it's been great for our friends and our family, especially our friends and our family who live all over the country and all over the world, to kind of keep tabs with us. So they get to listen to us, and it's really just, we were talking, my wife and I were talking the other day, all our podcast really is just a phone call with our friends. That's pretty much all it is.
So unlike Trish, who says she's not much of a podcast listener, I am an avid podcast listener, and it's that, which is one of the reasons why I don't edit it, because the podcasts that I like, very few of them are substantially edited. You keep in the screw ups, you make that part of the show. I love comedy podcasts, so I appreciate it when things go wrong, because you can sort of make a joke out of it and things like that. I also like science podcasts and other things that are a little bit more produced, but I think that's what people enjoy listening to.
Yeah,
is the conversation.
It's real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is.
Now, it's not always. Not every student is comfortable talking to teachers. Sometimes. You might have one teacher you're comfortable talking to, maybe two or something like that. But you're going to go through most of the faculty here over the next year. How is it for you to have a conversation that kind of talks about their personal lives a little bit?
Yeah, so I don't know. I think whenever I go into recording, I just think of the mindset that they're people too. And so then it makes it less awkward, having some kind of oh, they're my teacher, I'm the student, I'm the pupil, whatever. Yeah. And so that's how I usually maintain my composure when talking to the teachers. But yeah, sometimes when they go into really personal stuff, it's stuff I don't know yet. I guess I just get really enthralled. I feel like sometimes in the podcast when you're listening to it and then the teacher's done talking and I start talking, like sometimes I don't know what to say because I was just listening to them talk about this for the first time. And so it really is just like a normal conversation, and I think that's why it comes a bit easier to me. I mean, in class, I don't talk that much. Probably a lot of people will be surprised. Like, I think a lot of my friends were surprised when they heard I was doing a podcast. But outside of class, I can talk a lot. So that's why it wasn't that weird for me, no.
Well, I've been cheating for the last 5 years because I've always had a co-host for the exact same reason you mentioned, that what happens when you hit that pause in a thing and you don't know what to ask, or something happens that's weird or whatever, something that's thrown, like a curveball that you're not prepared for. I just kick it to my co-host who hopefully has something. I just look at them with desperation in my eyes, like, okay, fill in the space right now, please. Or vice versa.
And it's good because, like, you know, sometimes, I mean, that's definitely something that you learn the more podcasts you do, or if you're a writer, the more people you talk to. It's like, how do you listen, process, but also, you know, follow up on another question? You know, it's definitely a learning curve, but from what I've heard so far, they've been great.
So you said you do prep work, right? Before each episode? So what's your prep work entail?
So of course I have to figure out which teachers I can record with. So far what I've been doing is I send like a mass email to like 5 or 6 teachers. I see which ones get back to me. And after that I have to figure out, I have 2 study halls in my schedule this year. So I'm like, hey, do my study halls line up with yours? The schedule we have at our school at Camden Catholic, it's like a rotating schedule. And so sometimes, I don't know, I don't feel that I'm qualified to talk about the schedule that much, but like what happens is that our third period in the day out of 5, that one's 2 hours long. So you have your class and then you have a flex time and you have your lunch. They're all 30 minutes. So that's like the prime time that I like to record because it's, of course, much more flexible. That's why it's called flex. And so after I figure out when we can record, then I get to work on outlining. My outlines remain the same for about every episode so far. Usually I just start by bullet pointing, what do I know about this teacher from when I've talked to them before? What are some things I know that we can talk about a lot in depth? And I also come up with my segments. I like to have segments on my show, just like little games, little trivia things. Those take a lot of thought, actually. I spend the most time thinking about my segments. I like my segments a lot. And I think the only other thing I do for the outline is I just shoot the teacher an email and ask if they can give me a little bio that I can read in my pre-recorded intros for each episode.
Jen, how much preparation do I put into a podcast? If anybody's wondering, that's the amount of time it took for her to explain the preparation that she did is still more than the preparation I do for these things.
Yeah, it's true.
But that's wonderful because don't be like me. Keep doing what you're doing because that's going to be something that's going to, whatever field of work you get into at a later time, knowing how you want to organize things, oh man, that's outstanding. So keep up the good work. We really like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, like what works for you, and you're finding it out on in such a young age. So. And
oftentimes it makes the guests feel more comfortable if they have an idea of what it's going to be like. We've on numerous occasions had people reach out to us and like, what questions are you going to ask?
Oh yeah, I get that too.
Yeah, and I tell them I'm not telling you because
sometimes I'll tell them. If they ask, then I don't tell them the exact topics. I tell them something more generic because I do want it to be a bit more natural. Right. But yeah, I get that question too. So
nice.
Now, is that something you learned or that you helped her with, Mr. Bruckner, or
like my process?
Or is that something that just kind of came to you?
I just kind of did it when we were
Trish.
When before the equipment came in. I kind of devised that system, and it's been working so far. So.
If you're wondering who's going to replace me at the diocese at some point, it's going to be her.
Yeah.
She's an evil genius.
Yeah. Also,
like
you have a typewriter on your, like a little pin, and I was like, oh, maybe she'll be a future writer, too. I saw that right away. She's got a little typewriter pen.
What do you use to edit the podcast?
I have so I record everything, and I edit everything on GarageBand.
Okay. So, yeah, it's okay. Then I'm going to ask you a direct question. So, my original plan was use GarageBand, and I just never could get the feel for it, so I ended up using Audacity instead, which is a little more technical, and I would much rather use GarageBand. How long did it take you to actually figure out how to edit the the podcast?
Well, it's kind of funny because I do CCTV, and again, I've known Mr. Bruckner since freshman year. And sophomore year, I started doing skits, like recorded skits that I scripted, I wrote, things like that. For CCTV, it's usually we show them, it's like holiday themed, and we'll show them around the holidays. So actually, he had me use iMovie starting out sophomore year. And when I was looking at, first I had to learn how to hook up everything to record the audio, but once it got to editing, it's very similar to iMovie, just without video, and it's just you're looking at the audio track. So that is how it went when it came to editing on GarageBand. But I mean, if we're gonna go that route, then when I was learning how to do iMovie, that was Mr. Bruckner who taught me.
Well, that's good that you've had that. I didn't have anybody to teach me. I had YouTube videos. So I just was like, let me see if I can figure this out and we'll make it happen. Well, but that's the point. I like the fact that, hearing how this sort of generated itself. So I've told this on the podcast before, but the Talking Catholic empire that we now have, our digital empire, was inspired by Bishop Barron, who has this Word on Fire series. And I heard him talk at one point, and he was talking about how it started. It's now, a mega outfit. It's huge. It does incredible work. But it started out, he was in Chicago, and he just wanted to do something, and he started it, and he sort of built it from there. And that's what he said was, just start it. You'll figure everything out later. Yeah. It's nice to see, however, that you put a lot of thought into this as to how you were going to do it. Did it take you longer than you thought it was going to take?
I guess it was like me. For a while before the equipment came in, that was like the one thing I was always thinking about. I was like, I would always ask Mr. Bruckner, like, how's the equipment going? It's like, I was very excited. I think that's about it when it came to what it felt like time-wise. It was just like a whole lot of yearning, a whole lot of waiting. I was like really excited to do it because once I found out the equipment's actually coming in, I was like, oh my gosh, this is real. It's going to happen. So, yeah.
Nice. And what about the editing? Like when you said you listen to a lot, or you watch and listen to a lot of YouTube shows, where did you get all those little sounds from?
Oh yeah, I don't know. I just found them on YouTube.
Nice.
Yeah, the idea for the arcade sounds is again just because I like video games. I mean, I learned some things from YouTube, but again, a lot of it came from my experience with iMovie. So.
Are there any teachers you really want to have on that you haven't had on yet?
Too many to name.
Okay. Are you going to have any of the administrators on? Are you going to have Mrs. Creasy on?
Yep.
Okay, because she's been on our podcast, and she's the best. We like her a lot. She's very direct and surprisingly funny because, she's the principal, and sometimes, principals can be tough.
Yeah, that's exactly why I want to have her on my podcast, because I've had lovely conversations with her, but I feel like sometimes just the name principal might scare people. I want people to see, her as a person, so.
And don't get me wrong, she is tough, but man, she is a great human being. So, what kind of thing we should have her back on at some point. I forgot. Maybe before she gets her, we need to have her back on. So
podcast competition.
She's a delight.
So Trish, how many episodes are there going to be for this school year?
I'm trying to aim for 10. I mean, of course, like finals are coming up, and of course, I'm still a student, so I'm really trying to. That's a big thing that I'm learning is trying to balance it, because a lot of time does go into the editing portion and the recording itself. But I'm hoping to get at least almost every week until the end of the year, which should add up to about 10, 12. I forget the last time I counted, but definitely a couple more before the end of the year. Yeah.
Good. Will you do maybe like a special graduation one, you think, or?
Ooh, I don't want to think about it so soon, but yeah, probably. I've been thinking of having students on because, ever since the podcast came out and my fellow students have been listening to it, they're always asking, mostly as a joke, like, can I go on? But I do want to have my classmates on, so maybe I'll do that. I have a lot of ideas, and of course, I'm working on the 5th episode right now, hoping for a lot more, so we'll just see where it goes.
Now, you talked a little bit already about some of the segments that you have on. For those who have not heard the podcast yet, what are one or two of the regular segments that you have?
They're different every time. I try to model them like either guessing games or like tell me more about yourself kind of stuff. I think a good example of the one where I just have them talk more about themselves is the first episode I did with Mr. Smalldown. He's a math teacher, and so I thought it would be funny if I did a segment based off of PEMDAS, like the order of operations. So for each operation, I came up with a question. I think for parentheses, it's like, oh, that's like the first thing you do. So what's the most important part of your day? Something like that. But then I've also had like fun guessing games. Of course, Mr. Militia's episode, the Star Wars one. I asked him Star Wars trivia, and evidently he knew more than me, but he's the expert. I think that made sense. But yeah, I just try to make them fun. Just something, again, to just split up all the talking.
Yeah, and that's actually really nice. Now it's now making me regret the fact that we never produced any of our episodes, because that would have been a nice little tie-in. I'm just too busy. I can't do it. How much time would you say from beginning to end, from the time you first think about it to when you've actually put it up on Spotify? How much time does that take you?
I'd say like 4, 5, 6 hours. The editing takes up most of like the biggest chunk, because of course when I'm recording, I do it during the school day, and our classes are 1 hour, or if I'm doing it during a flex or something, I'm limited to 30 minutes. So the recording usually doesn't take that long, but it's definitely the editing, because I'm a very detail oriented person.
I can tell.
So sometimes the editing takes a while, because I'm like, I have to make sure it's perfect, blah blah blah. But yeah, the editing, I think the longest time I've edited for was 4 hours. That was Dr. Nguyen's episode, but that's because, again, it was an hour-long conversation. Okay. And since I like talking to these teachers and I like having conversations with people, I'm so indecisive. I'm like, oh, this is such a good conversation. I don't want to cut this out, but for the sake of time, I have to make those decisions.
That's very hard to do, but that's an incredible skill set. Okay, so in every movie you've ever seen, the actors have an important role and the director has an important role, but the absolute number one most important role in any movie, television show, recording, is the editor, because he's the one that actually puts the final thing together and tells that narrative and that story, and has to make all those hard decisions, with other people as well. But the editor, and it is incredibly difficult to decide what piece of perfection are you going to remove. This is something Jen has to work out constantly when she's editing articles, because there's only so much space, and she has to make that decision: is this worth keeping or not? Does this actually compel the story?
And like you said, it is hard, because it doesn't mean that one part of the story was bad. It's just you only have like a certain amount of words, a certain amount of space, a certain amount of time. So you have to say what's going to make the most impact. Yeah,
honestly, in my folders, I keep an extra copy of my recordings just so I can have the full conversation.
Smart.
Of course, I have the edited one, but I don't know. I just like the conversation too much. I don't want to completely scrap some parts of it. So.
I agree.
I would do the exact same thing if I actually edited this thing. We have the unaired first episode of Talking Catholic still exists. I am keeping it. The person we had on it, my former co-host, Mary McCusker, it's truly one of the greatest episodes it may be the best episode of the podcast we've ever recorded. But she promised me, because it was only supposed to be as a test, that I'll never release it, because she talked about a lot of personal stuff. She cries in the middle of it. But it's incredible. It's amazing. So she said, you can never release that. I said, how about when you're dead? And I said, well, then I care less. That will be your memorial when you go, kid. I'm telling you that right now, if I outlive you. Have you learned anything about your teachers that was a surprise?
I feel like, a lot. I think usually the thing that interests me the most is, of course, like when we get into like when I ask them about the subject they teach, because again, I've learned it's really hard to detach a teacher with what they like to do. Sure. Usually they'll tell the story of how they realized they liked a subject. And I know I'm the one asking the question, but I never expect the answers. And so, because I do talk to them a lot, but those are like some more really, really personal questions, I think, especially them being our teachers. It feels weird to ask them. It's like, well, why do you like teaching this? But I'm curious, and I have the podcast, so I ask those questions. And so, I think I can't really pinpoint one teacher I was the most surprised about. Of course, there's like little tidbits that I didn't know about them before that are interesting, but it's just all of the conversation I'm like really interested by, I guess.
So, one of the reasons I like doing our podcast is, the more people you get to know, the more similarities that we see, just among that we're all actually, a lot of the same. Like,
Yeah.
we have worries and hopes and dreams. Is that something that you have noticed doing your podcast, and do you feel like it's bringing people closer together?
I think when it comes to, it's kind of interesting. When I'm editing is when I really pay attention to how people speak. And so that's when I make connections like, oh, everyone has those ums. Like, for instance, I learned that I say like a lot, so I've been trying to work on that. But my teachers do too. But of course, I try to edit those things out just so, I try to present everyone the best that I can, just, to be respectful and stuff. But I feel like if I left some of that stuff in, everyone would realize that. I think that's something that is amiss with the fact that I edit, is that, of course, you realize that they're normal people and they're having a normal conversation, but true real conversations with those uhs and imperfections and stuff. But yeah.
Well, you know what? I wouldn't get too hard on yourself about that, because at the end of the day, that isn't really what you're doing. What you're really doing is presenting these teachers as human beings, and you do want them to be thought of well. I will admit, when the podcast first started, I used to remove every from it, and now I don't do that anymore. I talk to people beforehand, say, an is really just a pregnant pause. Just pause, because then you sound studious rather than filling it with an
Studious, yeah.
Just be, that kind of thing. So yeah, I just said it there. It's not that big a deal at the end of the day. But it's good that you put that thought ahead of you, because it means you have a certain level of respect, not just for your teachers, but for your guests. You would never invite someone over and make them feel bad or something like that. If they invite them to your house, you're inviting them into your little pod. Which actually, I've been meaning to ask, where do you record?
Ooh, everywhere. I have.
So yours is a fully mobile unit?
Yeah, I have a little cart. I was so excited when Mr. Bruckner pulled out the cart. He was like,
it.
so here's a cart, here's your equipment, you're going to put it on there, and then you can bring it to wherever you need to. And I was so excited. That's the first thing I told all my friends when they asked me how the podcast was going when it first came out. It's like, I have a cart, guys. I have a cart. So yeah, and usually I still get, when I'm like scheduling with teachers, they're like, oh, where should we meet? It's like, oh no, I'll come to you. And they're like, how? I was like, I have a cart.
I love it.
I do too.
I love that.
So cute.
I have a bag. We don't have a cart. I'd like a cart.
I think you have a birthday coming up. Maybe we should get you a cart.
I want other
Yeah.
stuff.
It's especially
Give me a
especially
grocery
fun because with the cart I get elevator privileges. I get to use the
Nice.
elevators.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Now I found out the real joy.
What if
All
I
right,
got
I
you a
like that.
grocery cart and put snacks in it, Mike?
I don't need to get any fatter, Jen. Thank you very much. So, is it a 2-mic setup, or do you have more mics? Like, if you wanted to interview a group of people, would you be able to?
At the moment, I only have one mic. Oh no, 2 mics. Sorry, I only have 2 mics. We'll have to see if I want to expand it, but I'm doing pretty okay with the 2 right now.
Sounds good.
We're open to expanding.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
we're past that preliminary stage.
I believe the beta test has shown that you have done the job.
Yeah.
So it is now.
I was worried about that.
Listen, I listened to it. It is so good,
Yeah.
and I'm so happy that you're doing it. And I'm so happy that you're doing it well. And I'm actually, I love the fact that you sort of dovetailed this into the overall classes that you're doing and the television station that you have here. Could you see this expanding in other ways?
Yeah, possibly. I think one of the things that a couple different things. So for a number of years, both myself and some other teachers in the building have used podcasts as a form of assessment, like some sort of like alternate assessment, project-based learning, where students can record or produce something that kind of shows mastery of content. And I found that to be like pretty successful for my communication students, especially. And one of the things that I was telling Trish the other day was I asked her, like, is there someone you think, because our seniors are, about to graduate. And I was like, oh no, when Trish graduates, what is going to, and we had a short conversation about it, but I told her, I said, like, one of the greatest forms of leadership and like legacy is the ability to leave something and have someone take over it and maybe possibly even, don't hear this the wrong way, even like improve upon it, because that shows that you were instrumental in that person's success. And that's kind of like how I view teaching. And so I can definitely see it expanding. But one of the things that, like, just from the get-go, like ever since this became an idea, one of the things I've learned over the years is that it can't just be a teacher-driven idea for people to get excited about it. a student really needs to be excited about something in order for this to become like a part of the culture. And so I'm just like grateful that Trish was excited about it and is excited about it. And I don't want her to work herself too hard to where she loses that enthusiasm, because that can also like sometimes happen. Trish is very humble. She doesn't talk about, or hasn't yet talked about, all the other hundreds of hours she spends leading her other clubs and activities. She's very involved, and everything she does, she puts in this incredible amount of detail into. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the reasons why I talked to her about the podcast in the first place, is because I didn't want to just talk to, there are a bunch of students around the building participating in this program, but one of the things that Trish prides herself in is her professionalism. And as I mentioned in my communications class, the world doesn't need more content, but it could always use better content. And one of the themes of my film classes is stories unite. So Jen, you were just talking about that, right? Like the more like we learn more about one another, the more conversations we have, the more we realize we're more alike than different. And I think a lot of times like the world wants to pull us apart, and specifically things that, whether it's agendas or that's media driven or politically driven or whatever, but just sitting across the table from someone and having a conversation. And when Trish asks questions about who these people are as people, it really forms a greater sense of community here at school.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's active listening, we can't dialogue until we listen. And you're bringing that to the school. You're introducing teachers in a new way that others haven't seen before. And I like that. What was the name of your class that you did? The World Unite?
Well, it's
a program?
It's my film studies, but the thesis, like my thesis for like the year is Stories Unite.
I like that.
Yeah.
And you're part of that. You're doing that right here.
Yep.
So since your teacher brought it up, what are the other hundreds of hours of things you're focused on at school?
Oh my. Well, I would say first and foremost, I would mention Asian Cultures Club. That's the main priority. I've been involved with the club ever since freshman year, and it's very special to me because the teacher, Ms. Bouchard, of course I'm gonna have her on the podcast coming soon, but that was before I met Mr. Bruckner at CCTV. That was until way later into freshman year. I joined Asian Cultures Club, and Ms. Bouchard was the moderator, and so she really, first of all, like put me out there to the club itself, helped me like what do you call it? Make friends in the club, and then a lot of those friends are my very, very dear friends now.
Oh, very nice.
And then even after that, since she knew that I was a bit late to the friend making game freshman year, she would introduce me to people in the hallway. Oh my gosh, I will never forget because I was so shy and I was so nervous being kind of like the odd one out for entering school a bit late in person. And so one time she caught me in the hallway, and she pulled like this random person and was like, "Hey, by the way, this is Trish. She's really nice. You should talk to her." And so Asian Cultures Club means a lot to me. I'm Filipino, and I'm very proud of my heritage. So last year I became president. I'm president this year, hoping to be president next year, of course. So that's my main one that I always go back to. I also am in the baking club. I became president of that this year.
I'm so excited right now.
Oh my gosh.
Podcasting and baking. I'm like, she's like my little sister.
Loves to bake. It's like his favorite thing ever.
It is my favorite thing ever.
Yeah.
So my big thing with that is I really want to do more baking related activities, because the leaders last year, I'll give it to them, they were very good leaders. They actually started having us do activities for our meetings, so I took inspiration from them. I've been leading that. I'm in a couple other clubs. I'm like in book society, just other interests. Of course I'm in CCTV. That's also a huge thing. It's probably one of my favorite things about school, and I'm not just saying that because Mr. Bruckner's sitting next to me. I really look forward to that every morning. I'm tech director now that the seniors are leaving, so yeah. There's probably some things I'm missing, but I don't know. I don't like talking about myself that much.
Oh, I don't know. I think you did. And just if anyone's wondering if we're in a school right now, you probably may have just heard the bell go off. And once again, no, I don't edit out. So it's staying in there.
You can hear the announcements.
Yeah, we're going to hear the announcements for Camden Catholic today. Actually, we're praying.
Father, we ask for your blessings as we end this day as the Camden Catholic family. Help us to use the gifts and talents you so generously bestowed upon us as we carry out your will. May the virtues of honor, faith, and loyalty shine brightly in everything we say and do, for the glory of your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay, that time I actually did pause the podcast so that we could pause for a second. If I didn't already do it, I am leaving the prayer in there. I just took out the rest of the stuff after it.
Wait, you turned it back on, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're recording again.
I remembered while I was going on. I do want to also mention that I'm involved in our theater program. I do love our theater program a lot. I have a lot of friends in cast more, but I do stage crew. I do sound. But yeah, that's the other main thing I do. But I just didn't think of it because it really comes to mind when the shows are happening. But yeah, so.
Okay, now I know what my wild card question is for you.
You're going to give me a wild card?
I'm going to give you. So, listeners, Trish has a wild card question on her podcast, and now I know what my wild card question is.
Hit me with it.
What is your favorite thing to bake?
Ooh, oh my gosh, that's such a hard question.
It is, isn't it? Because I have a list of things I love to bake.
You know what?
Do you want me to ask you that next?
I do.
I just recorded my 5th episode of Miss Bianchini, and she also likes baking, and so we did talk about this, and she mentioned my cream puffs because she likes them a lot, and you know what? I think those are my favorite things to bake. They were my first thing that I really baked that was not like just cookies or cakes. And of course, like cream puffs seem like kind of daunting because, they can deflate. There's like a lot of things you have to do. There's a lot of details you got to pay attention to. But the first time I tried it, came out pretty good. And I just make them whenever there's a family gathering or I've made them for the bake sales. And I also love eating them. So I think that's my favorite thing to bake.
And they're very difficult to make because you not only have to cook them and you have to bake them. So you make a shoe first, but you have to do that on top of a stovetop, and then you form it, and then you put it in the baking thing. So I'm telling you, she's not wrong. And I'll agree with her. My favorite thing to do, anybody can make cookies, which I just made the other day just because I felt like it.
You didn't bring any in.
I don't bring all the food to the staff. Sometimes I have to for family, but I'm the same way. I love baking intricate things, and that's far more entertaining for me than anything else. And then I feel bad because nobody else wants to eat them, but I love the science of it and trying to figure out how to do it best. That's very nice.
Trish, I am pretty darn confident that Mike is going to replace all of the co-hosts with you.
That is a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
In addition,
Wait until I graduate. I have schoolwork.
All right, you got one
my
year.
first Talking Catholic internship is going to go to her. I'm telling you that right now.
I mean, there's so many things in common. Your first podcast might just be about baking. Actually, you might have a new podcast, Baking with Trish and Mike.
Baking Catholic.
Baking Catholic.
This girl, I am writing it down because this girl's a genius. I'm doing that right now. I've had a couple of people come to me wanting to do baking stuff, or I've had somebody wants to do a podcast with me. There's a book out there. It's called Drinking with the Saints. It's all these different cocktails that are associated with saints, for not necessarily because it was the cocktail that the saint drank, but because the cocktail is sort of created with the saint in mind. And you really could do that, and I just haven't figured out a way of me doing that where I won't get fired. But baking sounds a heck of a lot easier. I think
fun.
That does sound.
It sounds
fun.
great for the staff because we could all try it when y'all are done.
Yeah.
It's a win.
All right.
It counts
It
as
is
your
a
job.
win-win.
Taste testing is part of it. So
That's right. And there's no such thing as a failure in baking. Even if you have to end up throwing, I've had two massive failures massive baking failures in the last 2 years. And I felt terrible about it, but I was like, you know what? I did it again, and I figured out what my flaws were. That's part of the process. There's no such thing as a failure. There's just stuff in the trash. That's all. The last one was a croissant. It was
Those
actually
are hard.
Well, those are hard, but I even made it more difficult by making it a cruffin. So I made it exactly a cruffin, right?
Oh my gosh.
It was
I'm so happy right now that you know what that means.
a Nutella cruffin. And so the first batch I made looked. Trish, want to tell you this? They were beautiful. They were beautiful crumpets. So it's a croissant basically made in a muffin tin, and it sort of explodes up, and it's gorgeous, and it's filled with Nutella. And I was like, this is so beautiful. I can't wait to eat this. And I pull out and I take like the outer layers off, and I'm like, oh, it's delicious, so good. And then I just break it open inside, raw, absolutely raw. Gorgeous on the outside, raw on the inside. And my wife was in the kitchen, and we're talking, and we were talking about something else, and I just pick everything off and I throw it in the trash. She goes, "What are you doing?" I go, I will kill someone if I let them eat that. She's like, "But it looks so good." I was like, no. So then I made it about a week later, and they were delicious.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid of failure, people. It's important. You learn from it.
You do.
I really want to go home and bake now.
Yeah.
It's been so long. Listen, I hope you continue with this because I think this is a great idea. Mr. Bruckner, this was such a phenomenal plan of you. You did a great job picking your host. She's outstanding.
Natural.
You know, and the things she's already said about CCTV and everything else that you put together. See, it's teachers like this that really, all right, this is going to be biased. It's teachers like this that I think make our Catholic schools, okay, I'm going to say it, superior to public schools. Not because public schools don't have great teachers and excellent work, but it's this little extra. You know, seeing that you know a student has some achievement. Even to what Trish said earlier about the fact that she was remote for so long and that she just had one of her teachers coming up and introducing her to people to force that interaction. That's caring for the whole person, which is what our Catholic schools do. And I love that. I have to commend Mr. Bruckner. Which teacher did you say that was that did that?
Oh, Mrs. Bouchard.
Mrs. Bouchard needs to be commended for doing that because that is knowing how to look out for your people and helping them to achieve. Right?
Yes.
That's what we're supposed to do.
Yes. It is.
Yeah.
You keep telling me I'm supposed to be an evangelizer, and I'm evangelizing for our Catholic schools
agree.
right now. Okay.
Well, there's nothing I can add to that because
okay.
I can add something.
No, I like.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Here we go. This is
You're
it.
going to replace me. Go for it, Trish.
Talking about teachers in Catholic schools, I've been thinking about the podcast because we were going to record last week, but then it got postponed. So I've been thinking a lot about what I was going to say and stuff, and I've been thinking a lot about how I got to this point, and I was thinking about my grade school. I went to Our Lady of Hope Regional School. I miss it every day because I love the teachers there. I feel like the teachers there really, you know, to have faith isn't just to have faith in God, but also have faith in others. And even at a young age there, they put a lot of faith in me and like encouraged my creativity. And I think that's why I've been so excited to do projects like this and get involved at school. So yeah, I would definitely say being at a Catholic school, I was like there from pre-K when the pre-K was still in the what do you call it, the church center and not in the building it's currently in. I was there all the way until 8th grade and graduated. And so I would definitely say that Catholic school has a little special something to it that really pushes students. Then I can attest to that, and you can see it through what I've been able to produce here.
All right, we got to send that to the schools department to clip out and use for something because that was outstanding.
Give it to John Caleb to snip it.
Exactly, which is another reason why our Catholic schools are so great. And to your point about the magic that happens on podcasts, you don't know what direction they're going to go in. I don't know what kind of an answer you're going to give at any particular time, other than the perfection that you just gave me. That was outstanding. And matter of fact, one more honor for you, Trish. I never edit the podcast. But we went long, and now I'm going to have to edit the podcast because you gave me such great content today. So thank you for that. Thank you for giving me a little extra work, but for being such a good person and doing such great work.
Thank you.
So I hope our listeners really enjoyed this podcast. I hope you guys stuck it out to the end because, quite frankly, that was the best part, which I'm going to have to put in the notes when we do this. Check Trish's podcast out on Spotify or wherever you get podcasts. It's Between Bells, CCHS, if you have to put it in the search. Look for hers in particular. Trish Escarrilla. Close enough. Close. You say it.
Trish Escarrilla.
Escarrilla. It was the other I. I kept messing it up.
Yep.
Trish
there is
Escarrilla.
No I in it, but the way we pronounce it, there is an I.
Well, I spelled it phonetically, and I didn't do a good job. So thank you for that. So Trish Escarrilla. Say it again. Escarrilla.
Yeah.
Listen to her podcast and pray for her because she's going to be a phenomenal person, a phenomenal adult when she leaves Camden Catholic, and then pray that she sticks around and helps the rest of us. And then pray for Mr. Bruckner as well, that he continues to do the great work that he's doing here. And this was great. Wow, I'm suddenly inspired and energetic.
You are. Like
I have no idea we're going to edit out of this podcast, to tell you the truth.
There's a little bit of a sunshine in your eyes right now.
Yeah, thank you, Trish.
That's right, listeners.
Thank you for having us.
No, you're very welcome.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure thing. See you, everybody.